the beginning of the beginning. That's what Marco Rubio said Friday afternoon at the State Department, standing between the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors after announcing what the Trump administration is calling a historic framework agreement between Israel and Lebanon. The beginning of the beginning. And I want you to hold on to that phrase, because unlike most of the victory language we've heard over the past few weeks about this entire Middle East situation, those 4 words are actually honest. This is the beginning of the beginning. Which means we are nowhere near the end. Rubio said, "Today is a good day in that we are happy to announce a framework agreement between the sovereign government of Lebanon and, of course, the government of Israel, with a mediation and support of the United States of America that begins to put in place a framework for lasting peace and security. And that's what these 2 nations deserve." Fine words. True words, even. Israel and Lebanon do deserve peace and security. The Lebanese people, 1 million of whom have been displaced from southern Lebanon since March, deserve to go home. Since March, Israeli strikes have killed more than 4,000 people in Lebanon, while at least 37 Israeli soldiers have died during the fighting. These are not abstract numbers. These are real people families, neighborhoods, entire communities caught in a conflict between a nuclear-armed regional power and an Iranian-backed militant group that has embedded itself so deeply into Lebanese society that trying to separate the two is like trying to separate water from ice. And that's exactly the problem with what got signed on Friday. Let's be real about it. Hezbollah was not party to any of the negotiations. Not invited. Not consulted. Not in the room. The group's leaders previously said they would not abide by any talks where their interests were not represented. And Lebanon has no official control over Hezbollah. The Lebanese government and Hezbollah are not the same thing, despite both existing within Lebanese borders. So the deal that was signed Friday is between Israel and the Lebanese government, an entity that does not have the military force to make Hezbollah do anything. And Hezbollah, which does have that force, wasn't asked and has already said it doesn't feel bound by agreements it wasn't part of. That is not a small detail. That is the entire ballgame. The framework agreement calls for a ceasefire contingent on a complete cessation of fire by Hezbollah and the evacuation of all Hezbollah operatives from the South Litani sector, an area in southern Lebanon. The State Department said the 2 sides agreed to swiftly advance the creation of pilot zones in which the Lebanese armed forces will take exclusive control of territory to the exclusion of all non-state actors. Lebanese armed forces taking exclusive control of territory that Hezbollah has held for decades. Let's think about that for a second. The Lebanese army, which is underfunded, under-equipped, and has historically avoided direct confrontation with Hezbollah specifically because Hezbollah is better armed and has Iranian backing, is supposed to move into southern Lebanon and establish exclusive control, pushing out a militant organization that has been dug into that terrain for 40 years. And if Hezbollah doesn't cooperate, the Lebanese army's options are limited. That's being generous. Walid Fares, a leading U.S. expert on Lebanon, told Fox News, "This agreement is just a ceasefire, not a conduit to a larger peace deal." Hezbollah takes orders from Iran. It's clear Tehran will complain about such a deal and pressure the negotiators to get some statement from Washington asserting the Islamic Republic's say over Lebanon. Hezbollah will attack the deal, but will pray Israel won't strike. And here is the most revealing detail of all. The trilateral framework statement does not mention a role for Iran. Iran, whose proxy force Hezbollah is the central military actor in southern Lebanon, whose backing of Hezbollah is the reason this conflict exists in the form it does, whose June 17 move with the U.S. specifically required the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts. including in Lebanon-Iran, is not mentioned in the framework document. Netanyahu called the deal a severe blow to Iran and said essentially Israel, Lebanon, and the United States are telling them, "This is none of your business. You have no role in southern Lebanon, neither you, nor Hezbollah, nor any other terrorist organization." Israel's ambassador put it even more bluntly. In this performance-based trilateral framework agreement, Iran is out. Hezbollah is out, and the road to peace between Israel and Lebanon is in. That sounds great. It's a great line. But saying Iran is out doesn't make Iran out. Iran has been out of Lebanon officially for decades, and its weapons, its money, its training, and its commanders have been very much in. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps didn't build Hezbollah into the most powerful non-state military force in the world by staying out of Lebanon. You can sign all the framework agreements you want. If Hezbollah decides on Saturday morning that it's going to fire rockets into northern Israel, the Lebanese government's signature on a piece of paper in Washington doesn't change that decision. Now, to be fair, and this is actually important, there are real reasons why Friday's announcement matters even with all these caveats. An end to hostilities between Israel and Lebanon is considered crucial to obtaining a lasting peace deal between the United States and Iran, which sponsors Hezbollah. The June 17 move between the U.S. and Iran specifically listed Lebanon as a front where fighting must stop. Every day Israel continues striking Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, Iran has a legitimate grievance that the MOU is being violated, which gives Iran a reason to walk away from the 60-day nuclear negotiations, to reclose the Strait of Hormuz, to escalate. So getting any kind of framework in place on Lebanon, even an imperfect one, reduces one of the pressure points that threatens to blow up the entire U.S.-Iran peace process. Lebanon's president, Joseph Aoun, thanked the U.S. administration for its efforts in hosting and facilitating the negotiations and for supporting Lebanon's position. Lebanese ambassador Nada Hamadeh called the talks long and difficult, but said the framework was a first step on the road to restoring Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity. These are genuine diplomatic moments. The fact that Lebanese and Israeli representatives sat in the same room for 4 days and produced a signed document is not nothing. Lebanon and Israel have been in a formal state of war since 1948. Talking is always better than not talking. But here's what you need to understand about the timeline and why Al Jazeera is pointing out that this is at least the third framework agreement or similar announcement in the past 3 months. In April, Rubio hosted talks between the two sides after fighting in Lebanon threatened to derail a previous U.S.-Iran ceasefire. That produced an agreement to launch direct negotiations. In May, 2 days of negotiations concluded with a framework for negotiations to advance lasting peace. And now, in June, we have another framework agreement described by its own chief architect as the beginning of the beginning. 3 frameworks in 3 months. No actual peace. A temporary lull in fighting earlier this week had already begun to fracture after Israel carried out several fresh strikes against Hezbollah targets across southern Lebanon. And the day before this framework was announced, Thursday, Iran drone struck a Singapore cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz, and the UN paused its entire shipping evacuation operation. That is the environment in which this framework was signed. Not a stable, de-escalating situation. A situation where the parties are still shooting at each other the day before they sign agreements to stop shooting at each other. Fairs added, the regime is telling Hezbollah keep the narrative up and radical, but let us get the money first. Israel is giving its public something and mindful of Trump's concerns about the deal with Iran. The Lebanese government is hoping their army does not have to engage. The only unknown is the ability of the Lebanese opposition to rise and resist Hezbollah. Read that carefully. Everyone at the table has a reason to sign something that doesn't actually commit them to anything painful. Iran wants the sanctions money and is telling Hezbollah to play along for now. Israel gets to tell its public there's a diplomatic process while maintaining its security zone. Lebanon's government gets to look like a functioning sovereign state without actually having to confront Hezbollah militarily. And the US gets another signing ceremony. Nobody has to actually do the hard thing yet. The hard thing is when the Lebanese army rolls into southern Lebanon and tells Hezbollah to leave. That's when we find out if any of this means anything. Trump called Netanyahu crazy last week on the record, confirmed it, and told him to use a softer touch on Lebanon. Netanyahu is now celebrating this deal as a severe blow to Iran. Trump had said we have a little dispute over Lebanon at the G7 and told Netanyahu you don't have to knock down a building every time somebody walks into it that's from Hezbollah. Those tensions haven't gone away. They've been papered over with a framework agreement that calls for things nobody has agreed to enforce. Fox News here's the bottom line. What happened Friday is real. Two countries that have been formally at war for 78 years sat down and produced a document. That deserves acknowledgement. But calling it a first step and calling it the beginning of the beginning are both honest descriptions of something that is nowhere near done. 4,000 Lebanese are dead. 37 Israeli soldiers are dead. 1 million people are displaced. Hezbollah wasn't invited and already said it doesn't feel bound by deals it wasn't part of. The Lebanese army has to displace a force it has historically avoided confronting. And Iran, which funds, arms, and directs Hezbollah, isn't even mentioned in the document. This is not peace. This is the beginning of an attempt at peace. And after 3 frameworks in 3 months, the American people deserve to understand the difference. Share this if you think the full picture matters more than the signing ceremony photo. And drop a comment, do you think Hezbollah actually leaves southern Lebanon under this framework? Or is this another agreement that collapses within a week? Because based on the pattern we've seen, that's the most important question nobody in Washington wants to answer right now.